Silence swallowed the black SUV whole. Rain hammered against the windows in thick, violent sheets, each drop sliding down the glass like a tear the sky itself was crying. Lightning fractured the Miami sky into jagged white pieces, and in that strobing, terrible light, Sofia Reynolds sat trembling on leather that cost more than she earned in 3 months. He told me I had 48 hours to disappear, or my son wouldn't live to see 9. The words tore out of her before she could stop them. Her voice cracked like old glass, barely a whisper, barely a sound. Her black and white maid uniform clung to her skin, soaked through and dripping onto the immaculate floor of the vehicle. She didn't care. She couldn't care about anything except the $22,000 that didn't exist and the surgery that couldn't wait and the 3 days that were already slipping away like sand through her open fingers. Luca Russo studied her face with eyes that had seen every kind of lie, every variation of desperation, every way a human being could break. 34 years old, shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of an empire, a scar running from his left eye to his jawline like a map of violence survived. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored to perfection, the fabric worth more than Sofia's annual salary. He didn't move. He barely seemed to breathe. "Where is he?" Luca's voice dropped like a stone into still water, deep and solid like an oath. "At St. Mary's. Room 317. He's 7 years old, and he's afraid of the dark, so I leave the light on all night and he falls asleep holding my hand." Sofia's hands shook as she pressed them together. "The surgery is in 3 days. His heart is dying inside his chest, and I have $5. She pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket, a college acceptance letter, torn along the edges, Oliver's name still visible in the letterhead. She had kept it. She had kept it because it was proof that he had existed before this, that he had been brilliant and bright and full of possibility before his body betrayed him. $5, she whispered. Through the rearview mirror, Rocco, Luca's driver, a man who had been with him for 15 years, exchanged a glance with his boss. Something flickered across that moment, something unspoken, something neither of them fully understood. Luca leaned forward. His movements were deliberate, each one controlled, the way a general surveyed a battlefield. "Who threatened you?" "I can't tell you. He said if I told anyone, if I went to the police, if I said his name to a single soul, he would make sure Oliver never made it to the operating table. He said the hospital has accidents. He said surgeries fail." The rain intensified. Thunder rolled across the city like a warning. "Douglas Hale," Luca said. It wasn't a question. Sofia's entire body went rigid. Her eyes widened with a terror so pure, so absolute, that Rocco had to look away. She was shaking so badly now that her teeth chattered audibly, a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. "How did you?" "Because I own the hospital. Because I know every doctor in that building. Because I know when someone tries to leverage against me." Luca's voice remained level, almost conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. "And because Douglas Hale has been a problem for exactly 7 months and 14 days, which is how long you've worked in my house without knowing I was watching." Sofia's breath came in shallow, panic gasps. "You're going to hurt him. Oh God, you're going to hurt him, and he's just a child. Look at me." She didn't want to. She wanted to die. She wanted to disappear into the rain and never come back. "Look at me, Sofia." She forced her eyes to meet his. What she saw there was not cruelty. It was something far more complex and infinitely more dangerous. It was certainty. It was a man accustomed to fixing broken things by whatever means necessary. "Your son will have his surgery," Luca said. "In 3 days. At St. Mary's. The best cardiologist in the state will be there. A specialist from Johns Hopkins will be there. And you will not pay a single cent. Why would you do that? I'm nobody. I'm just. Because the people who did this to you believed you were nobody. And that belief needs to be corrected." The words hung in the silence between them like a blade suspended in air. Rocco shifted in the front seat. In 15 years of working for Luca Russo, he had never heard him speak to anyone this way. Not with gentleness. Not with this careful, deliberate tenderness. It was like watching a man soothing a wounded animal back to trust. What he told you about 48 hours, Luca continued, was a lie. You are not going anywhere. You are going to sit with your son tonight. You are going to hold his hand while he sleeps. And in the morning, you are going to walk into that hospital like you have walked into my house for 6 months, invisible, strong, carrying the weight of the world. And then what? Sofia's voice was so small now, barely existing. And then Douglas Hale discovers that threatening the wrong woman has consequences he cannot comprehend. Lightning split the sky again. For a moment, they were all frozen in white light, 3 people in a car suspended in the middle of a storm, each one understanding that something fundamental had just shifted, that whatever happened next would echo through both of their lives in ways none of them could predict. Sofia looked down at the torn college acceptance letter in her hands. Oliver's name was still there. Future still there. Possibility still there. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what comes tomorrow. Every comment you leave helps us continue creating stories that matter. Now, let us go back to the beginning, to the day Sofia Reynolds became invisible in Luca Russo's world. 6 months earlier. The alarm on Sofia's phone had been broken for 2 years. She used the church bell instead, the one that rang at 5:30 every morning, its sound drifting through the thin walls of her studio apartment like an echo of faith she could no longer afford. She was 28 years old but looked 40. The mirror in her bathroom was cracked down the middle. She dropped it the day Oliver's diagnosis came back, the day a doctor with kind eyes had said the words congenital heart defect and the world had split into before and after. She dressed in the dark. Black pants, white shirt, black vest. The uniform of invisibility. 3 jobs provided this uniform in rotation. The upscale restaurant on Brickell where wealthy men left $3 tips on $100 bottles of wine. The hotel where tourists complained about water pressure and thread count. And the mansion, the sprawling estate in the Wynwood district where she cleaned rooms she was never supposed to see, dusted objects whose price tags would have funded her entire life. Her wallet contained exactly $5. It would need to stretch until Friday, when the restaurant paid out cash tips. Oliver's medication cost $40 a month, and this was his last week of his current prescription. The math was simple. The math was impossible. She took the 5 a.m. bus downtown, the vehicle rattling through streets that were still dark, through neighborhoods that didn't sleep because people like her kept them functioning while everyone else dreamed. The bus smelled like diesel fuel and human exhaustion. She had learned not to think about cleaner things. The mansion gates opened at 6 a.m. for the cleaning crew. The property sprawled across 2 acres, white stone walls, fountain in the courtyard that probably cost more than her building. Security guards nodded as she passed. She was a ghost to them. Invisible. Exactly what she had trained herself to be. She had learned invisibility the way other people learned languages. You moved quietly. You didn't make eye contact. You cleaned what was assigned and left no trace of your presence except the evidence of your labor. In this house, there were 12 rooms, each one worth more than everything she owned, each one a window into a world where children didn't die of defective hearts because their mothers didn't have enough money. On this particular morning, she was assigned the master suite on the 3rd floor. She pushed the cart down the hallway, feet whispering against marble, the sound of her own breath the only proof that she existed. The master suite was enormous. A bed the size of a small car. Windows that looked out over the city. On the nightstand, she saw the collar of a black shirt, carelessly discarded, the fabric so fine it looked like water. She was changing the sheets when she heard the shower turn off. She froze. She wasn't supposed to see him. The family was supposed to leave during the day, and she was supposed to work in the spaces they had abandoned. This was the rule. This was the contract of invisibility. The bathroom door opened. Steam rolled out. And Luca Russo stepped into the bedroom wearing nothing but dark pants, his chest bare, the scar on his face stark white in the morning light. For a moment, neither of them moved. Sofia had heard the staff talk about him. The owner. The man who decided who worked and who didn't, who lived in the city and who disappeared. She knew the rumors, organized crime, dangerous connections, men in black SUVs that arrived at night. But rumors were abstractions. This man, standing 3 feet away from her, water still glistening on his dark hair, was devastatingly real. "I'm sorry," Sofia whispered. She kept her eyes on the sheets. "I didn't know anyone was home." Luca didn't respond immediately. He was studying her the way she had learned men sometimes did, not with desire, but with something more complex. Like he was trying to read a language he didn't speak. "What is your name?" His voice was calm, almost curious. "Sofia Reynolds." "How long have you worked here?" 6 months. Still staring at the sheets. "And in 6 months, have you ever made eye contact with me?" She hadn't. She had been deliberately invisible, deliberately absent, deliberately nothing. "No," she said. "Why?" The question was simple, but it carried weight. Sofia's hands trembled as she continued changing the pillowcases. "Because that's the job. Because I'm supposed to be invisible. Look at me, Sofia Reynolds." She didn't want to. But something in his voice made it impossible to refuse. She raised her eyes to meet his, and what she saw was a man who had spent his life being seen, being feared, being obeyed. A man for whom invisibility was impossible. For whom power was the only visibility that mattered. "You are not invisible," he said. "Not anymore." He turned and walked back into the bathroom, leaving her standing there, sheets half folded in her hands, her heart hammering in her ribs like it was trying to escape her body. She finished the room quickly, not understanding what had just happened, not understanding why those words had terrified her more than any threat ever could. She had no way of knowing that Luca had noticed her the first week she'd worked there. Had noticed the way she moved, careful, precise, grieving. Had noticed her checking her phone constantly, always tensing when it rang. Had noticed the worn edges of her uniform, the calloused palms, the dark circles under her eyes that suggested sleepless nights spent worrying about something very specific and very terrible. What she did not know was that grief had made her visible to him in a way that no amount of prettiness or confidence ever could. What she did not know was that Luca Russo, who had built an empire on vengeance after watching rivals murder his father when he was barely 17, had recognized in Sofia the same hunted look he remembered from his own childhood. And in that moment, standing in his shower as water poured down over him, something had fractured inside his carefully controlled heart. 6 months earlier, at 5:47 in the morning, Sofia Reynolds pulled on her black and white maid uniform in a studio apartment with peeling wallpaper that looked like the building itself was shedding its skin. The fabric was worn soft from 100 washings, the hem coming loose at the right ankle, a small unraveling that matched the feeling in her chest. She tied her dark hair back with a rubber band that had lost its grip 3 months ago, securing it as best she could. In the corner, on the pull-out couch that served as his bed, Oliver slept with the shallow breathing that had become the rhythm of their lives. 8 years old. His small chest rising, falling, rising again, each breath a small victory against the valve in his heart that no longer worked the way a child's heart was supposed to work. She moved to him quietly, the wooden floor creaking under her weight, and pressed her lips to his forehead. His skin was cool. That worried her. She left his medication on the counter next to a bowl of cereal, the same cereal 3 days in a row because it was on sale for 99 cents, and she had learned to make boring taste like survival. On a piece of notebook paper, she wrote in careful letters, "Eat breakfast. Take your pill. Mrs. Chen will pick you up at 2:30. I love you more than anything." She left at 6 o'clock. The Miami heat was already building, pressing down on the streets like the lid of something closing shut. The bus came at 6:15, smelling of diesel and human exhaustion. Sofia sat by the window and counted the money in her wallet for the 204th time that month. $17. $17 to last her 5 days until her next paycheck. She had already decided that today's lunch would be skipped, pushed into tomorrow, stretched thin across the week. She had already decided that his medication was non-negotiable, that her own food was the place where corners could be cut. The surgery was scheduled in 89 days. 89 days from the moment the cardiologist had placed a piece of paper in her hands, typed, official, stamped with the weight of medical truth, that said, valve replacement required. Congenital defect. Timeline, critical. $22,000. The number was so large it did not feel real, like saying the moon cost money, like saying she could buy the sky if she saved long enough. She was saving. In a coffee can hidden behind the flower in her kitchen cabinet, she had accumulated $3,412. Every dollar came from double shifts, from not sleeping more than 4 hours a night, from eating the leftovers that restaurant customers left behind, food that had been discarded but was still good, still edible, still the difference between meeting the goal and falling short. $3,412, and she needed $18,588 more. The mansion appeared at 6:30, white and towering against the pink sky like something that had been lifted from a magazine and placed on Miami Beach to prove that another world existed. Luca Russo's home. She had memorized the address 3 weeks ago when the agency called about the position. The black iron gates opened, and the bus deposited her at the service entrance, a discreet door painted gray, designed so that people like her would never be seen entering from the front. For other staff members were already there, all women, all speaking in low voices or not speaking at all. Nobody looked at her. Nobody said good morning. Sofia had learned that invisibility was a skill you could develop if you worked hard enough. The interior of the mansion opened up like a cathedral built for money instead of God. White marble floors stretched in every direction, reflecting the light from floor-to-ceiling windows that faced Biscayne Bay. Artwork hung on the walls, paintings in gilded frames, sculptures on pedestals, objects that cost more than everything Sofia had ever owned combined. A Monet in the hallway. A marble torso in the foyer. These were not things people like her were supposed to notice, but she noticed everything. She noticed because noticing was how you stayed safe. She noticed because she was invisible, and invisible people could look as long as they did not touch, did not speak, did not take up space. Her supervisor, a pinched woman named Elena, handed her a list of rooms. The library first. Sofia pulled a cart loaded with cleaning supplies, lemon-scented solution, soft cloths, a vacuum that cost more than her monthly rent, and entered a room with walls lined in dark wood, floor to ceiling, thousands of books that looked like they had never been read. The furniture was leather and heavy. The desk was mahogany, polished to a mirror shine, with a computer and papers scattered across its surface. She did not read the papers. She did not look at them. But as she dusted the shelves, she heard voices approaching, and she remained very still, the way prey animals remain still when a predator passes. "The territory is slipping," a man said. His voice was deep, accented, carrying the weight of authority. "Luca." She had not seen his face, but this voice belonged to the man who owned the house, the man whose money paid her minimum wage, the man whose life was as incomprehensible to her as the surface of Mars. "Douglas Hale is moving product through the east side. That's our operation." Another voice responded, rougher, angrier. "Rocco." She had heard the names whispered by other staff members. "We send a message. Tonight. Let him know what happens when he forgets whose city this is." "Not yet," Luca said. "Not until we understand his connections. His uncle is still dangerous, but Douglas is young, arrogant, stupid. He will make a mistake. When he does, we strike." Sofia did not move. Her hand rested on the spine of a book, something by someone named Hemingway, and she kept her breathing shallow, kept her body small and unremarkable. The voices continued, discussing money, territories, violence, all spoken as casually as if they were discussing the weather. She was furniture in the corner, a painting on the wall, a decorative plant. After 5 minutes, the voices moved away, footsteps receding down the hallway. She finished the library in silence. The rest of the mansion unfolded room by room. The master bedroom with a bed large enough to fit her entire apartment. The bathrooms with marble countertops and fixtures that gleamed like gold, because they probably were gold. The kitchen with appliances that looked like they had never been used, stainless steel and chrome, pristine and sterile. She scrubbed and polished and dusted and disappeared into the work. This was what she was good at. This was what kept her invisible. This was what kept her safe. During her lunch break, she sat in the service kitchen with the other staff members and ate the sandwich she had made from the end of a loaf of bread and a single slice of cheese, spreading them thin so they would last. Nobody asked her questions. Nobody engaged her. The older woman next to her, Maria, Sofia thought, though they had never properly been introduced, ate rice and beans from a plastic container, the smell of garlic and onions filling the small space. Maria did not offer to share. Sofia would not have accepted if she had. 3 times that first week, Luca Russo walked past her as she worked. The first time, she was cleaning the hallway, on her hands and knees, scrubbing the grout between marble tiles. His shoes appeared first, Italian leather, black, expensive, the kind of shoe that spoke of a world she would never inhabit. She did not look up. She heard him stop for a moment, heard him breathing, and then he continued walking. The second time, she was dusting picture frames in the living room, her back to the room, focused entirely on the abstract painting in front of her. She sensed him more than saw him, a presence that made the air feel heavier. The third time, she was emptying a trash can in his private study, and she found herself trembling as she worked, fully aware that he was somewhere in the mansion, breathing the same air, existing in the same space as her for the first time. He never looked at her. Not once. She was invisible to him, which was exactly what she had hoped for. The evenings belonged to Oliver. She picked him up from Mrs. Chen's apartment at 3:30, and they rode the bus home in the fading light. His homework was in his backpack, along with a note from his teacher. Oliver seems tired in class. Is everything okay at home? Everything was not okay at home. Everything would not be okay until his heart was fixed, until the surgery was complete, until the worry that lived in her chest could finally exhale. She did not write back. She could not afford the time it took to craft a response that would not reveal everything. At home, she made dinner from a box of pasta and a jar of sauce, stretching it across 2 plates so it looked more substantial than it was. Oliver ate with the careful movements of a child who had learned that his body had limitations. He did not run. He did not play. He sat quietly and did his homework and took his medications and asked her when he could go outside to play like the other kids. And she said soon, baby, soon, knowing that soon was not a date on a calendar but a promise she was trying to keep by accumulating dollars in a coffee can, by picking up extra shifts, by becoming invisible enough that nobody would notice if she disappeared. Before bed, she showed him the acceptance letter she kept hidden in her nightstand, the paper soft and worn from handling. It was from a college in California, San Diego State University, dated 12 years ago, when she was 16 and believed that the world worked in a way that was fundamentally fair. The letter was addressed to Sofia Reynolds, telling her that she had been selected to attend, that her essay about overcoming obstacles had moved the admissions committee, that a full scholarship was waiting for her. She had been so excited she had cried. She had imagined herself on a campus somewhere beautiful, learning things, becoming someone different. But her mother had gotten sick that spring, and then her mother had died that summer, and then Sofia had gotten pregnant at 18, and the college acceptance letter had been folded and placed in a drawer where it remained, a monument to a future that would never happen. Oliver looked at it the way he looked at things he knew were precious but did not fully understand. "Will you go to college, Mama?" he asked. And she said, "Someday, baby. After your surgery. After everything gets better." She did not believe this. But she said it anyway. She fell asleep counting the days until the surgery, the dollars she still needed to find, the hours of sleep she was foregoing. In the darkness, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Tell anyone about what you heard at Russo's place, and you will regret it. We're watching." She read it 3 times, her heart stopping, then restarting, then stopping again. She deleted the message. She did not sleep for the rest of the night. The rain came down like a blade wrapped in ice, and Sofia Reynolds stood on the shoulder of Highway 95 with nothing but $5 in her pocket and a prayer that had stopped working somewhere around mile marker 187. Her 1998 Honda Civic had died 30 seconds after she pulled over. Not a gentle death, an engine sputter, a grinding sound, then silence so complete it felt like the sky itself had stopped breathing. She stood in the downpour, a uniform plastered to her skin, steam rising from under the hood like the car was giving up its ghost. Lightning split the horizon in two. Then split it again. The storm had come from nowhere, transforming the humid Miami afternoon into something closer to a punishment. She had left the hospital at 4:17 in the afternoon. Oliver's surgery was scheduled for Thursday at 8:27 in the morning. 3 days from now. The cost was $22,000. Her bank account held $11,247. She was short by $10,753, and she had no way to find it. The extension she had begged for that afternoon had been denied. The hospital administrator, a woman named Patricia with reading glasses on a chain, had looked at her with professional sympathy and said the words that meant the same thing as a door slamming shut: "We understand your situation, Ms. Reynolds, but we have payment protocols. If the balance is not received by Thursday morning, we will have to reschedule." Reschedule? As if Oliver could just wait another month while his heart struggled through summer heat. As if there was time. As if time was something she actually had. Sofia tried the ignition again. Click, click, click. Nothing. She got back out into the rain, soaked completely now, shaking. Not from cold but from the weight of 8 years pressing down on her shoulders like a stone that had grown heavier every single day. 8 years of working double shifts, of eating the leftover food nobody wanted, of sleeping for hours a night, of counting pennies while the cost of living kept climbing. 8 years of fighting so that Oliver could live. And now, when it mattered most, when the finish line was finally visible through the rain and the darkness, she had failed. The thunder was close enough now to feel in her chest. She stood there in the downpour, one hand on the dead car's hood, and something inside her broke. Not dramatically. There was no scream, no collapse. Just a quiet fracturing, like ice cracking under weight. She thought about that college acceptance letter, still in her nightstand drawer, the paper soft from 12 years of handling. San Diego State University. Full scholarship. A future that had belonged to someone else, someone young and hopeful and unburdened. That Sofia Reynolds had believed the world was fair. That Sofia Reynolds had believed in things. The headlights appeared first as distant shadows through the rain. 3 of them, moving in formation down the highway, cutting through the downpour like sharks cutting through dark water. She did not move. What was the point? She had no phone, no way to call for help. The vehicle slowed as they approached. The middle one, a black SUV with tinted windows, came to a stop 30 feet from her car. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the rear window rolled down with a mechanical hum. The man inside was Rocco, though Sofia did not know his name. She had seen him before, always standing behind Luca Russo in the hallways of the mansion where she cleaned, always watching, always silent. He had eyes like a predator that had learned patience. He looked at her for 5 full seconds, rain streaming down his face through the open window, then picked up a phone. "We have a situation," he said. His voice was rough, weathered. Highway 95, mile marker 191. A woman. Stranded. I recognize her from the property. Sofia could not hear the response, but she watched Rocco's face change slightly. A nod. The phone was lowered. Rocco gestured to her. "Get in." She should have said no. Every instinct screamed that getting into a vehicle with men like these was how stories ended badly. But the thunder cracked directly overhead, so loud it felt like the sky was splitting open, and she thought of Oliver in his hospital bed, and the surgery that would not happen Thursday if she did not find another way, and she moved toward the SUV like a woman walking in her sleep. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne and something darker underneath. The seats were warmer than any place she had slept in months. Rain drummed on the metal roof in a rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. Rocco sat across from her, water dripping from his dark hair onto a suit that probably cost more than her rent. Next to him was another man, younger, with a scar running from his left eye to his jawline like a map of violence. Theo, though again, she did not know this. "You work at the Russo property," Rocco said. Not a question. "Yes," Sofia whispered. Her teeth were chattering. I clean the bathrooms. The bedrooms. You are invisible." He was not unkind. Just stating facts. "Mr. Russo would like to know why you are standing on a highway in the middle of a tropical storm." Sofia opened her mouth. Closed it. What was the point of lying? These men probably already knew everything. They probably knew she had exactly $5 to her name. They probably knew about Oliver. They probably knew about the college letter and the dream she had abandoned and the way she had learned to breathe in smaller and smaller ways. "My son," she said, and her voice broke on the word like glass dropped on tile. "He has a heart condition. Congenital. He needs surgery. Thursday morning. It costs $22,000. I have been saving for 8 years. I have $10,747. I am short by. I do not know how to get the rest." The rain on the roof was so loud now that she could barely hear herself. She did not look at either man. She just sat there, soaking wet, breaking apart in the back of a black SUV driven by men who could break her in ways that had nothing to do with the rain. Rocco picked up the phone again. "Mr. Russo. She has a son. 8 years old. The surgery costs $22,000. She comes up short." There was a pause. Then, through the phone speaker, a voice so deep it sounded like it was coming from underground. "Tell her to sit still. We are coming to her now." The SUV did not move. They waited in the rain, and Sofia waited with them, and the thunder kept cracking overhead, and she did not yet understand that she had just triggered a sequence of events that would declare war on 2 separate fronts and reshape the entire landscape of her life. 20 minutes later, another vehicle pulled up behind them. Longer, blacker, more expensive. The rear door opened, and a man stepped out into the rain without hesitation, without even bothering with an umbrella. He wore a dark suit and a white shirt open at the collar, showing the defined lines of his chest and the faint edge of a scar that ran across his collarbone. His hair was dark, swept back from his face, and his eyes, grey like storm clouds, scanned the scene with the precision of a general surveying a battlefield. This was Luca Russo. 28 years old but looking older, the way power ages men differently, the way violence leaves marks that have nothing to do with time. He had built an empire on the graves of men who had killed his father when Luca was barely 17. He had learned to smile without showing teeth. He had learned to make people disappear. He looked at Sofia, wet and broken and terrified, and something in his expression shifted. "Get her inside," he said to Rocco. His voice was calm. "Just a request." But when Rocco moved, he moved fast. Sofia was ushered into the second vehicle. Luca sat across from her, the same position Rocco had occupied, and he asked one question: "What do you need?" She told him everything. The words came out in a rush, tangled and desperate, about Oliver and the valve replacement and the surgery date and the way she had failed to find a way to save him. She told him about the double shifts and the counting pennies and the night she realized that 8 years of fighting might not be enough. She did not tell him about the college letter. That wound was too old. When she finished, Luca did not move. His face remained completely still, but his hands, scarred, calloused, marked with the kind of damage that comes from taking what the world does not want to give, tightened into fists on his knees. "Why," he said slowly, "did you not ask me?" Sofia's laugh was bitter. "Ask you? I clean your toilets, Mr. Russo. I empty your garbage cans. I am nobody. Why would you help me?" Luca leaned forward. The movement was small, but it filled the entire vehicle. His cologne, sandalwood and smoke, wrapped around her like something suffocating. "Because," he said, you work harder than men I pay 6 figures. Because you have never stolen from me. Never gossiped. Never asked for anything. Because I know what it is like to be 8 years old and helpless. He paused. The rain hammered against the metal roof. My father was murdered when I was 17. I watched it happen. My mother spent the rest of her life looking at me like I was supposed to fix it. Like I was supposed to make it right. No one helped her. No one gave her money for medicine or food or the therapist who might have saved her from drinking herself to death. So I built something. I built an empire. And now, when someone comes to me, truly comes to me, I fix it. He picked up his phone. Made one call. Said nothing except her 22,000. The Russo account. St. Mary's Hospital. Transfer immediately. The call ended. Sofia stared at him. Your son will have his surgery, Luca said. Thursday at 8 in the morning. He will live to be 9. And beyond that. He will live, and he will know that his mother fought for him every single day. You are not nobody, Sofia Reynolds. You are a lioness pretending to be invisible. At that same moment, 3 blocks away in a black Mercedes with leather that smelled like wealth and entitlement, Douglas Hale watched the black SUVs pull away from the highway with the intensity of a man who had just spotted an opening. Douglas was 26, the nephew of a man with significant connections and significantly less ethics, and he had been looking for leverage against Luca Russo for months. He had found it. The maid. The sick child. The desperation that made her vulnerable. He picked up his phone and called his uncle. I found our way in, he said, and smiled. 3 days after Luca Russo transferred $22,000 to St. Mary's Hospital, after Oliver's surgery was scheduled, after Sofia Reynolds began to breathe again for the first time in 8 years, Douglas Hale made his move. It was 3:15 in the afternoon. School pickup time. The Miami sun hammered down on the concrete parking lot outside Riverside Elementary, turning the asphalt into something that shimmered like water. Mothers and fathers collected their children in the heat. Sofia stood by the chain-link fence, her worn purse clutched against her chest, waiting for Oliver to emerge from the building, waiting for that moment when she could see his face and know he was still hers. The black Mercedes slid into the no-parking zone like a predator claiming territory. Douglas Hale stepped out. 26 years old, with a kind of face that had never been told no. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. Gold chains caught the sunlight. Everything about him broadcast entitlement and the absolute certainty that the world would bend to his will because his uncle's connections made him untouchable. He blocked her path. Sofia's stomach tightened. She had seen him once before, at a party in Luca's mansion 6 months ago, a nephew who laughed too loudly and touched women without permission. She had made herself invisible then, as she always did. Now he was looking at her like she was the most important thing he had discovered all week. Sofia Reynolds, he said. Her name sounded like a threat in his mouth. Funny running into you here. How is Oliver doing? Her blood went cold. How do you know my son's name? Douglas smiled. Pulled out his phone. Scrolled through photos. Oliver entering the school gates, his backpack bouncing. Oliver leaving St. Mary's Hospital, holding a prescription bag. Oliver in their apartment courtyard, playing with a ball, alone, completely unaware he was being watched. You have 48 hours, Douglas said, his voice dropping into something crueler. You are going to start feeding me information about Luca Russo's operations. The shipments. The meetings. The names. Everything. You will wear a wire. You will record conversations. You will become my informant. Sofia shook her head. No. I will not. Douglas stepped closer. Then I make one call to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. One call, Sofia. Your visa status is complicated, is it not? One call and they come to your apartment at dawn. They put you in a detention center in Georgia. They deport you to a country you have not seen in 15 years. And Oliver. He paused. Let the silence stretch like a blade. Oliver does not just lose his mother. He loses his insurance. He loses the medications keeping his heart stable. He loses the person who knows exactly how to comfort him when he cannot sleep. Who pays for his life then, Sofia? Who takes care of him? The parking lot tilted. The sun was too bright. She could not breathe. You have until tomorrow night at 11 p.m., Douglas said. After that, the call gets made. You understand. She understood. She understood perfectly. That night, after Oliver fell asleep, his breathing finally steady and easy for the first time since birth, Sofia Reynolds stood on her apartment balcony on the 14th floor and watched a summer storm roll in across the Miami skyline. The wind came first. Hot and violent, tearing at her hair, at the thin fabric of her dress. Then the rain. Not gentle rain. This was rain like an accusation, rain like the sky was angry, rain that came in sheets and soaked through everything it touched. Thunder cracked so loud she felt it in her chest. Through the glass door, she could see Oliver sleeping on the couch, his small body curled into the corner, his chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm she had prayed for since the day he was born. His surgery was in 4 days. For days, and he would be healed. For days, and they could have a life. Unless she was gone. She pulled out the burner phone Douglas had given her. The one with his uncle's number already programmed in. Her hand shook as the rain soaked her hair, soaked her face, mixing with tears she could not stop. She dialed 3 digits. Her thumb hovered over the call button. Then she saw it. Through the window, on the small table beside Oliver's sleeping form, lay a torn piece of paper. The college acceptance letter. Oliver's name across the top in official lettering. The letter Luca's money had made possible. Oliver, at 14, accepted to one of the best schools in Florida. A future. A path out of poverty and invisibility. Sofia thought of Luca at 17. Watching his father murdered. Building an empire out of vengeance. And then choosing mercy for a woman he did not know. She deleted the number. The phone fell from her shaking hand and clattered against the balcony railing. She pressed her forehead against the wet metal, rain pouring down her face, and made the only choice a lioness could make. She called Luca. The phone rang once. Sofia. His voice. Solid. Immediate. Like calling God and having him answer. I have to tell you something, she said. Her voice broke. And after you hear it, you will understand why I cannot do what he is asking. You will understand that even though I am afraid, even though he has threatened to take Oliver from me, I cannot betray you because you are the only person who has ever treated me like I matter. Tell me, Luca said. She told him everything. Douglas. The photos. The threats. The 48 hours. The ICE call that would destroy them both. Luca listened in complete silence. When she finished, he said 6 words. Get Oliver. Rocco is outside. Within 20 minutes, a black SUV pulled up to their apartment building. Rocco emerged. 38 years old, shoulders broad as a doorway, movements efficient and economical. He did not ask questions. He simply helped Sofia gather Oliver, helped carry the sleeping boy to the vehicle, helped them both into the back seat where Theo waited with a thermos of hot coffee and blankets. Where are we going? Sofia asked. Safe house, Rocco said. Luca's property in Coral Gables. You will stay there. Guards posted. No one touches that boy while we draw breath. The SUV moved through the rain-soaked streets of Miami, through neighborhoods Sofia did not know, toward a future that suddenly felt possible again. But what Douglas Hale did not comprehend in his moment of satisfaction, in his belief that he held all the leverage, was a simple fact: he had threatened a child. He had photographed a child. He had used a child as a weapon against a man who had been 8 years old when his own father died. Death would have been merciful. Death would have been too quick, too easy, too clean. Luca Russo did not want Douglas Hale dead. He wanted him destroyed. At 5:36 a.m., the morning after Sofia made her choice, 12 FBI agents in tactical gear moved like ghosts through the lobby of Douglas Hale's waterfront penthouse. The battering ram hit the door at 5:48 a.m. The door splintered. Agents poured through like a tide. Douglas woke to flashlights and shouting. Hands grabbed him from bed. Silk pajamas, $800 Italian fabric, ripped as agents yanked him to his feet. His face was pale. His hands trembled as the cuffs locked around his wrists. Douglas Hale, the lead agent said, reading from a tablet. You are under arrest for money laundering, RICO violations, witness intimidation, and conspiracy to commit immigration fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Douglas's voice cracked. My uncle will fix this. You do not understand. I am protected. My uncle has connections, he will. Your uncle is in the car behind us, the agent said flatly. Federal prison, Douglas. 40 years minimum. You can talk to him there. They led him out in handcuffs. News cameras were already there, already filming. The footage would be everywhere within an hour. The cocaine connections. The shell corporations. The recorded threats against Sofia. Banking records tracing $20,000 of illegal money flowing through his accounts. Every screen in Miami would broadcast his face as he collapsed into sobs, his confidence shattered into something pathetic and broken, something trembling like a cornered animal. By sunrise, he was in federal custody. By breakfast, every news outlet in Florida was running the story. Meanwhile, across the city at the Four Seasons Hotel, Sophie Langford held court at the annual Coral Gables charity luncheon. She wore pale blue. A Chanel suit that cost more than Sofia Reynolds had earned in a year of double shifts. Her hair was styled in waves. Her jewelry caught the light like captured stars. Around her sat the elite of Miami. Bankers. Developers. City council members. People who had voted her onto every important board, every exclusive committee, every social institution that mattered. She was laughing about a recent acquisition when Rocco approached her table. Ms. Langford, he said quietly. You should see this before it goes public. He placed a folder on the table. Inside were photographs. Sophie with a married city councilman, in hotel rooms, in parked cars. Financial records showing embezzlement from her own charity. $43,000 diverted to a personal account. Leaked emails containing language so racist, so classist, so cruel that the women around her stopped mid-sip of their wine. A waiter changed the channel on the restaurant television. The news broke live. Sophie's face flashed across every screen. The affair. The stolen money. The emails. A reporter stood outside her Park Avenue apartment, explaining that her lease had been terminated, her bank accounts were being frozen, federal investigators were preparing charges. Sophie's hands trembled as she tried to speak, to explain, to fix it. But the people around her were already standing. Already filming her on their phones. Already posting to Instagram and Twitter. Already beginning the systematic dismantling of everything she had built on the backs of people she considered invisible. Within 4 hours, she was uninvited from every board. Within 8 hours, every major news outlet in the country had run the story. The destruction was total. Systematic. Merciless in its completeness. Both villains shattered in a single dawn. Neither had seen it coming. Neither understood until it was finished that threatening a child in Luca Russo's protection was not just a crime. It was a declaration of war against a man who had spent 15 years building an empire on a single principle: those who cannot protect themselves will find protection in him. The rain stopped. The Miami sun returned, bright and merciless and clean. And in a safe house in Coral Gables, Sofia Reynolds held her sleeping son and allowed herself, for the first time in 8 years, to believe that the worst was finally over. The restaurant was so quiet you could hear the silver fork settling against the porcelain plate. Sofia Reynolds sat across from Luca Russo in the same candlelit booth, but everything had changed. 6 months had passed since that night on the rain-soaked highway, 6 months of silence between them, and now she held his gaze without flinching, without the trembling that used to betray her fear. She wore a deep blue dress that fit her properly, that showed she belonged at tables like this, not clearing them. Her hair was styled. Her hands were steady. Luca studied her face like a man reading a book he thought he had finished, only to discover entire chapters he had missed. "You look different," he said, and his voice was deep and solid like an oath. "I am different," Sofia answered. The words came easily now, without the hesitation that had defined her before. "I am no longer afraid." 6 months earlier, Sofia had moved into the apartment in Coral Gables that Luca had arranged without her permission. The lease was already paid. When the first month's bill arrived, she had wept, not from shame, but from the simple fact that someone had decided she mattered enough to protect. She had not allowed herself to cry like that in years. Oliver was 9 years old now, running through the modest but safe apartment with the energy of a boy who had gotten his heart surgery, who had gotten his life. His scar, running from his breastbone downward, was a map of his survival, and every time Sofia saw it she remembered the $22,000 that had hung over her like a blade wrapped in ice, and how Luca had transformed that blade into salvation. She no longer worked as a maid in his mansion. That job belonged to another invisible woman now, one who was counting pennies, one who was terrified. Sofia had moved forward. Luca had quietly resolved her immigration status through legal channels, a process that should have taken years but took 3 weeks for a man with his reach. A sponsor. A work visa. A pathway to citizenship that did not require desperation. She now managed community outreach for one of his legitimate businesses, a position where she earned enough to support herself and Oliver with dignity. She helped other immigrant families navigate the same legal systems that had nearly destroyed her. She used her scars to show others the way forward. Rocco and Theo exchanged glances as Luca stood to greet her when she arrived at the restaurant. In 15 years of working for him, they had never seen him stand for anyone. The 2 lieutenants withdrew to give them privacy, but both men knew what they were witnessing. Something had shifted in their boss. Something that looked dangerous in a completely different way. "How is Oliver?" Luca asked once they were alone. "Playing soccer," Sofia said, and a smile touched her face. "He wants to be on a team next year. He says his heart is too strong to stay on the bench." She paused. "He talks about you sometimes." Luca's jaw tightened. "What does he say?" "That you are the man who saved his mother." Sofia leaned forward slightly. "I have never corrected him. Because that is exactly what you did." The candlelight cast shadows across Luca's face, highlighting the scar that ran from his eye to his cheekbone, a permanent reminder of a past she had never asked him to explain. He reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm. His grip was gentle. This was a man capable of ordering unspeakable things, and yet his touch was careful, as if Sofia might break. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "I have wanted to tell you for 6 months, but I needed you to stand on your own first. I needed you to know that what I am about to say comes from a place where you are no longer desperate, and I am no longer your savior. We are equals now." Sofia's breath caught. She knew what was coming before he spoke the words. "When I saw you on that highway in the rain," Luca continued, "I saw my mother. I saw every person who had ever needed help and never received it. When I was 17 years old, my father was murdered. I built this empire on vengeance. For 23 years, I have built it on the principle that strength comes from taking everything from those who threaten you. But watching you rebuild, watching you take nothing from me except what you needed to survive, watching you transform from a woman counting coins into someone who helps others count their own, it changed me. It changed what this empire means." "Why did you do it?" Sofia asked, and her voice was barely a whisper. "You did not have to. I was nothing to you. You were never nothing to me. Luca's grip on her hand tightened slightly. You became everything to me the moment you asked for help instead of stealing it. The moment you thought about your son before yourself. The moment you stood in my SUV in the rain and chose to survive for someone else. He paused. I built this because I swore that no child of mine would ever watch their parent murdered. I sustained it because I swore that no one under my protection would ever be invisible again. Sofia felt tears forming, and she let them fall. She did not try to hide them or wipe them away. She allowed Luca Russo, a man who had spent 2 decades building an empire on vengeance, to see her cry from something other than fear. I love you, she said. The words came out simple and true. I have loved you since that night in the rain, when you looked at me like I was a person instead of a problem. I have loved you for 6 months while you quietly protected us. I love you standing here as someone who has rebuilt her own life. Luca stood and pulled her to her feet. Around them, the restaurant had fallen silent. Every person in the room was watching as the Mafia boss took Sofia's face in both his hands and kissed her. It was not a desperate kiss or a possessive one. It was a kiss that promised something neither of them had expected, a future built not on transaction or debt, but on equal ground, on the foundation of 2 people who had chosen each other freely. 1 year later, the same restaurant, the same booth, but now Sofia wore a ring on her left hand. Not ostentatious, not a claim of ownership, but a simple band of white gold that caught the candlelight. She had built 3 community centers in that year. Her immigration status was now permanent. Oliver was thriving in a private school on scholarship, his medical records showing a heart stronger than any doctor had predicted. She held a position of real authority, and the people she helped no longer asked permission to thank her. She had earned her place. Luca reached across the table and took her hand, as he had 1 year before, but this time it was different. This time it was recognition. I have something for you, he said, and he produced a folder. Inside was a photograph, not of threat or exposure, but of the torn college acceptance letter that Sofia had clutched on that night in the SUV. It had been framed. Preserved. Made permanent. This belongs in your office, Luca said. Where you can see it every day and remember that your son got to live because you refused to break. A week later, Sofia stood in the park with Oliver while he played soccer with a group of children, running without limitation, breathing without fear, whole. Luca appeared beside her, and she reached for his hand. They watched their son move across the field, because Oliver had become their son, the child both of them had fought to protect. Do you ever think about that night on the highway? Luca asked. Every day, Sofia said. I think about how desperate I was. How I was ready to disappear, to let you take Oliver away from me just so he could survive. I think about how a Mafia boss answered my distress call instead of passing by. She turned to face him. And I think about how mercy saved us both. You were not looking for love. You were building an empire. But somewhere in the rain and the fear, you chose a different path. Because of you, Luca said. The wind moved through the park, carrying the sound of children laughing, the sound of life continuing, the sound of ordinary people living ordinary days that had been bought with extraordinary sacrifice. Sofia thought of the woman she had been, invisible, terrified, counting dollars on a kitchen table at 3 in the morning. That woman felt like a ghost now, like someone she had been in another lifetime. She thought of the Mafia boss who had decided that an empire built on vengeance needed to be sustained by mercy. She thought of how Douglas Hale and Sophie Langford had been destroyed not by bullets or violence, but by the exposure of who they really were. Their downfall had been systematic, complete, and it had served as a warning to everyone who dealt with Luca Russo: protect those under your roof, or face the full force of his power turned against you. But that was not the story that mattered anymore. The story that mattered was the one happening right now, in a park in Miami, where a woman and a man who had been broken in different ways had chosen to rebuild together. Where a child played without pain, without fear, without limitation. Where the most powerful man in the city had learned that true strength was not measured in weapons or territory, but in the choice to love someone unconditionally. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Sofia leaned against Luca, and his arm came around her without hesitation. Oliver ran over, breathless and alive, and climbed between them. Three people who had been saved by each other, standing together in the fading light. "I love you," Sofia whispered, and Luca kissed the top of her head. "I know," he said, and his voice was gentle. "You have shown me every day for a year." When the sun disappeared completely, they walked home together, and none of them looked back at the highway, at the rain, at the fear that had brought them together. They looked forward, toward the future that mercy had built. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only love can do that. If this story moved your heart, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel because tomorrow we have another story you will not believe, a story about a woman who discovers that the man she is running from is the only person who can save her. Share this with someone you love. Drop a comment telling us what you would have done in Sofia's position. We read every single one of them. New stories every day. Do not miss what is coming next.